um, Kevin can't be with us today because he's working for the police department right now.
Wow.
Yeah.
How dare he, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
right. When I need him. Kevin's actually been with me for 5 days in the last 2 weeks because he took part in our police training. We've had our 5-day police training. So I am completely wiped out, dead on my feet, because it's like hosting a cocktail party for 5 12-hour days, essentially.
Wow.
We had 71 presenters for these police.
Wow.
So
That's crazy.
it's a lot to pull together. And of course, we're running short-staffed here in the office, but I'm so glad we did it because it's the first big live event. And it was so great because all the presenters, it was the first time they'd been together for a while too. So
Right.
it was really started pulling people together. And it was very, very well received. But I'm telling you, I'm dead on my feet. I'm trying to make up for everything I missed in the office. And then I'm going off for the long weekend. But
Good.
so
Good.
next week I should be more human.
Okay.
But
We won't hold you to that.
okay. I've been kind of grumpy this morning. We're going to bring Dr. Ablon on right away because he has kind of a tight schedule, and I want him to have time to take questions because he is so good at that interaction. So we're going to wait a couple minutes, and I don't know. We told him, anytime after noon, and we'd get him on just as soon as he came on. So. The other thing I want to do at the very end of the meeting, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we do have a lot of materials on the island that we produced last year. And so maybe we could get a couple of volunteer committees together at the end of the meeting to work on that type of stuff, and then we can follow it up on individual committee.
Holly, are you on the highway?
Hi, yes, I'm on my phone.
Hi,
En
Howard.
route to Rochester to visit Marty's family.
Is that Rochester, New York?
That's it.
I haven't been there in a long time.
Yeah, did you have family there?
No, I went to college near there and I married a Cornellian. And so Rochester was one of the Syracuse and Rochester were the nearest cities. It's not that far from Ithaca, really, around a couple of lakes.
Yeah, yeah, it's a pretty area, a lot of
It's
it.
pretty, especially this time of year.
The Finger Lakes are gorgeous. Everyone thinks of New York. When I say New York, they think of the city, and they think anything north of Poughkeepsie is upstate. Well, actually, Syracuse is the center of New York, and there's a whole bit of New York way beyond Syracuse, going north to Canada.
Oh yeah, I was there.
Yeah,
Canton, New York.
Yep.
4 cold years.
Canton, New York.
Yep, so I went to St. Lawrence.
You went to St. Lawrence. So did my uncle and a few other people in my family. I applied to St. Lawrence and didn't go there. Went to a girls' school instead.
You were smart and warm.
Yeah, warmer. But
Warmer.
no, I still have a home right in that area.
Really?
Yeah, just outside of Canton. In fact, we rent it sometimes for St. Lawrence homecomings and graduations and stuff.
Yeah, I've been back for a couple of reunions. Not much actually has changed. The campus has changed tremendously. The town, not so much.
No, the town hasn't changed that much. In fact, there's things that have closed, but
Yeah.
But it's interesting, that area, even though it's in the way up in the boondocks, as you would say, there are 4 colleges right there because you've got Clarkson, and you've got SUNY Potsdam, and you've got SUNY Canton plus St. Lawrence.
Right.
So we actually talked about retiring there because felt there'd be, and you're not, you're only an hour from Ottawa too.
Exactly. I spent more time in Ottawa than Syracuse. Syracuse is 2.5 hours away. Yeah,
definitely. And you're not all that far from Montreal if you want to go big time.
Yeah.
So, whatever. So how are we on attendance here now that we're chatty? And have we seen Dr. Ablon yet? We know he's
I don't see him yet.
Okay. I can say a bit about Dr. Ablon while we're waiting for him. He is been known as the 5th best academic speaker in the world. He is very engaging. The first time I had a Dr. Ablon program, it was a 6-hour introduction to Think Kids, the program he directs at Mass General Hospital and Department of Psychiatry. And it was open to the public. We had a hotel venue that could take about 250 people. We got 400 signed up for it. It was December 6th, which is Saturday, getting right into the Christmas holiday rush. We still had those signups. We served a free buffet lunch, which was after 3 hours of presentation. And I thought, okay, you have 3 hours of presentation on a busy Saturday. You're serving a free lunch. Who's going to come back? They all came back.
Wow.
He's that good as in speaking. And I just had him as the keynote for the 5-day police training I was talking about. And he did a 2-hour keynote, and he had 28 young cops in the palm of his hand for those 2 hours. So he's very engaging, and he's written several books. The Think Kids program is a fantastic program. And I think especially at this time, it's a collaborative problem solving program. It goes on the basis of meeting people where they are, and that if people can do things, and especially kids, if they can do well, they will. If they're not doing well, there's a reason for it, and you have to try to figure it out with the kid and help them to be part of the solution, not just consider them the problem. So it's
Did this go out to school counselors, I imagine?
well, it went out to the school because we have school people on this committee or on this group, and we tried to get it out to quite a few people, but I don't know if is it Deb Gately, and who's the other person that often comes
Sherry,
up?
it's Sherry Lewis.
Sherry.
Deb's out right now. I know she's not in the office today.
Well, I know that, Mike, we talked about it clear back a few years ago, and then it just didn't pan out because of all kinds of circumstances, but
I think it was a scheduling
it was
problem for Stuart.
Yeah, no, there was that type of thing. Yeah, we couldn't fit the schedule in with the school schedule and all of that. There's been some talk, of course, Stuart is out of Mass General Hospital, and of course now Nantucket Cottage Hospital is part of the Mass General system, and there's been some interest from Mass General to try to get the Think Kids program on Nantucket. But of course, this is a bad year, I think, to even talk to schools because.
Well, I think it's a bad year, and yet it is an ideal time because
Right.
counselors and teachers and everybody is extremely worried about the emotional and social health of our children,
Right.
not to mention the physical. So maybe Beth could do something with a keynote next year.
Yeah, we could probably. It's interesting because when Stuart gave the keynote last week for my police training, he expressed things in a way that I knew, but I hadn't expressed it that way. And that's his gift. He said that the kid that was in 7th grade in 2020, when we had the shutdown, has been isolated and shut down for 2 years. And now that kid is all of a sudden back in school in 9th grade, but he still has social emotional development of a 7th grader, but he's asked to be in high school.
Looks like he's with us.
Okay, great, because I know he has a schedule. So can we see I want
Here
to
he
see
comes.
Dr. Ablon. Okay.
There
Hi,
he is.
folks.
Hi
Jackie.
there, Dr. Ablon. I told them quite a bit about you because I didn't want to get into anything else because I wanted to be ready when you came on. But I am very, very pleased to have Dr. Stuart Ablon with us today. We were just talking about where the schools are at this point, and it might be a good time to start talking about what we're going to do next year in the schools when they maybe settle down a little. Dr. Ablon is the director of the Think Kids program, and that is based on collaborative problem solving, which is a technique that is good for anybody. I just, as I said, had Dr. Ablon do a keynote for police, and collaborative problem solving went over very well there. Think Kids is a program in the Department of Psychiatry at Mass General Hospital, and the Mass General Hospital Department of Psychiatry, I read, is #1 ranked in the country. So, and also it's a teaching hospital for it's Harvard Medical School. Dr. Ablon has written several books, and they're very available. I've read them all, believe it or not, and because they're very readable. And Dr. Ablon, as I said, is been noted as the 5th best educational speaker in the world. I have to look up sometime who the top 4 are. I'd like to know who's better. So anyway, it's with a great deal of pleasure that I do introduce Dr. Stuart Ablon to you, and I think he'll give us some enlightenment on what he sees is happening right now, especially as a result of COVID. So Dr. Ablon, and we want this to be interactive, which is he is excellent at. So this is your opportunity. So take it away.
All right. Well, thank you, Jackie, and nice to see you again after just seeing you live in person, which is always better. Last week, that was a lot of fun to be able to be with everybody in person. So thanks for having me here, folks. So my understanding is I'll do sort of like a quick overview of our work in about a half hour or so, but happy to have people ask questions and interject as I go, and then have some time for questions and discussion at the end. Does that sound right?
Fine.
Sound good? Okay. Let's say, I guess, Sue, your host, could you make me co-host so that I could, or enable screen sharing so that I can share some visuals as we go here?
Yep, should be all set now.
All right. Let's see. Yes, excellent. All right. So, all seeing this now? Yes, great. Okay. All right. So Jackie already explained that. So I have the honor of directing a program at Mass General called Think Kids, and that's where our work emanates from. I think one of the things I'll talk about some today is that the work has been extended, though, well beyond just applications with kids and adolescents, and at this point, is sort of extended across the lifespan. We are a program, as Jackie said, in the Department of Psychiatry at Mass General, but we actually do our work all over the world at this point. And so what I want to introduce you to is this approach we call collaborative problem solving, which is a evidence-based, trauma-informed approach to helping particularly youth, but also adults who might exhibit a sort of broad array of social, emotional, or behavioral challenges. And it's one of the few approaches where we've been able to demonstrate effectiveness across a variety of different settings. So it's really a nice match for systems of care work, where you're trying to sort of bring systems together around a shared philosophy, mindset, practice, et cetera. And as I mentioned, it can be applied across the lifespan. Where it all really started, though, is I think for my entire career at this point, so going on about 30 years, I've really focused on trying to answer this question, which is what causes challenging behavior. And where I always like to start with folks is reflecting upon the fact that most people's answer to what that question, or to why any individual is exhibiting some form of challenging behavior, is usually guided by some form of conventional wisdom about challenging behavior. And as this visual in front of you illustrates, there are plenty of examples of conventional wisdom in our history that end up being disproven, even though people hold on to the beliefs long after they've been disproven. So, the notion that the world is flat was scientifically disproven long before people sort of gave up on that view. And when it comes to challenging behavior, the conventional wisdom about challenging behavior really sort of all flows from this notion that people do well if they want to, and that everybody's sort of capable of behaving well. And if they're not, it must be because they're sort of not particularly motivated to behave well. And in particular, this is especially true in our schools. It's actually built into our assessment and intervention systems in our schools. What we tend to believe is people, and I do a lot of focus on kids and adolescents, we tend to think that they use their challenging behavior in order to get things or get out of things. In other words, that there's a function behind their behavior to seek or avoid things. And that all flows from this notion that the behavior is sort of intentional, purposeful, at times manipulative. And if you subscribe to that mindset that people are quite capable of behaving well, but are actually using some form of challenging behavior to get stuff and avoid stuff, well, the problem with that is it leads you right in the direction of what I call carrot and stick approaches to trying to modify behavior, whether that is traditional school discipline, whether that is the use of rewards and consequences in our homes, whether that's point and level systems in treatment programs, correctional facilities, you name it. All those things sort of flow from the conventional wisdom about challenging behavior and indicate that, kids or people do well if they want to, and if they're not doing well, we just got to make them want to. And the way to do that is to modify behavior through rewards and consequences. Well, I always like to tell people, the interesting thing about conventional wisdom is it's almost always disproven. And this notion about what causes challenging behavior, it's actually been disproven at the beginning of my career. 30 years ago was sort of the first convincing research. And now there is 30 years of research in the neurosciences that all points to sort of, the big idea behind our work, which is that people who struggle to manage their behavior, they don't actually lack the will to behave well. What they lack are the skills to behave well. And particularly what we're referring to here are neurocognitive skills. And those are skills in areas like flexibility, frustration tolerance, problem solving. All of the research has shown, show me somebody who has a hard time managing their behavior at home, school, work, etc. I will show you somebody who is struggling in one of these overarching domains, if not more. And if I just drill down for 1 minute, a sort of a little deeper, what all of this research and neuropsychological research has shown is that if somebody's struggling to manage their behavior, you will find that they are lagging in skill development in at least one, if not more, often more of these 5 areas of neurocognitive skill. Language and communication skills, attention, working memory skills, emotion and self-regulation skills, which of course is just a fancy way of saying controlling or managing your emotions or yourself, flexible thinking skills, and social thinking skills. Now, the other big piece of information that we've learned, since our research is not limited to just neuropsychological research, we can actually use imaging research to peer into the brain, is we've learned that the devastating impact of chronic stress and trauma on brain development. And this is perhaps one of the biggest findings of the last few decades. And this is just a visual representation here of what we now know. And that is that when somebody's exposed to chronic stress or trauma during development, particularly early development, it dramatically alters and stalls brain development. So these are just an example of a neurotypically developing brain on the left and a little toddler subject to toxic stress. And you'll note the parts of the brain there that are not lighting up in the scanner. Well, what do those parts of the brain do for us? You got it, folks. All these things here. So there's a lot of talk these days about sort of being trauma informed, trauma sensitive. et cetera. And I think if we're truly being trauma sensitive, what we've got to realize is that exposure to chronic stress and trauma impacts brain development, which results in lagging skills in these domains in front of you, which the downstream effect of that is challenging behavior. Now, what that means is your responses to challenging behavior, to be, quote, trauma informed, have to be skill focused. And unfortunately, what I see in our schools, other places, is often the opposite. To be honest, I refer to this as a cycle of chronic stress and punitive discipline, because I think what happens is kids and adults are exposed to chronic stress and trauma, which impacts brain development, as I said. So it leads to lagging skills, which causes challenging behavior. And then if we respond with punitive discipline, what that does is it increases stress, further getting in the way of skill development, escalating challenging behavior. And in our schools, in our treatment programs, et cetera, in our homes, when a kid's behavior worsens, what do we usually do? We usually up the ante on the punitive discipline. Again, adding stress, further getting in the way of skill development, escalating challenging behavior. I think this is a visual representation of what is often referred to as the school to prison pipeline, in fact. And of course, in the last 3 years, what have we seen? We've seen skyrocketing exposure to chronic stress and trauma. What has that resulted in? Real skill regression. And as a result, challenging behavior, especially when you put people back into situations and expect them to have skills that they either haven't developed or they've actually regressed around. Now, I like to point out that, while this sounds depressing, because there's a lot here that we don't have easy answers to, that punitive discipline is actually a choice. Responding to challenging behavior with punitive discipline, that we actually don't have to do that. And that's the core of our work, is trying to respond to challenging behavior with something different. And what I would term broadly as relational discipline, or relationship focused discipline. And what we've shown, whether it's collaborative problem solving, our approach, or other relational approaches have also shown, is when you respond to challenging behavior with relational discipline, evidence-based approaches that are relational, you actually decrease stress. And not just stress for the kids, but stress for the adult caretakers, whether those are parents, teachers, et cetera. And not only do you not get in the way of skill development, you can facilitate skill development. And when you have less stressed people with better skills, of course, what do you see? Better behavior, which then in turn makes it easier to sort of keep the whole thing going. So despite this being an enormously difficult time, while I was hopping on, Jackie, I heard you refer to this, it's, in our schools, for instance, as you were alluding to, all this chronic stress has really resulted in skill regression from kids. And at the same time that expectations have marched ahead. So time has stood still for development, but expectations have marched ahead. In many cases, skills have regressed, creating this large gap between demands and skills, expectations and skills. And this is why we're seeing a ton of challenging behavior at this point in our schools and everywhere, to be honest. And again, not just kids. You read all these things about horrible behavior that's occurring all kinds of places, airplanes, all kinds of places. It's the same dynamic. It's the same dynamic. Challenging behavior happens in the gap between demands or expectations and skills that we're able to bring to bear. Now, the good news, I guess, here is that skills can be built. And this is sort of the focus of our work. What we try to do is we first supply a philosophy to people. But we sort of challenge the notion that this is as simple as kids or people do well if they want to, we just got to make them want to. In fact, we're proponents of the notion that people do well if they can, not if they want to. That all kids want to do well. And that if they're not doing well, we know why. It's about skill, not will. So we teach people that, if somebody has the skills to handle a problem in front of them, well, then they will, and they'll behave well. When do people behave poorly? When they're struggling to bring skills needed to handle a problem. So in this approach, there's a big mindset shift that happens, but then there's some real practical implications. And obviously, I'm just going to give sort of a flyby overview of this. But whether it's the police that we were working with last week with Jackie's conference, whether it's educators, that we're working with in the schools in the Vineyard, or in Australia, we do some work there, whether it's correctional facilities, you name it, whether it's in my own home, your home, et cetera, whether it's with a kid, with an adult, pick any problem you have with anybody's behavior. And what we like to teach people is ultimately only have 3 options for how to handle a problem you have with somebody else. This could be a colleague, it could be a relative, could be your child, et cetera. And we give these labels in our approach. We teach people that ultimately your 3 options are to try to make the person do what you want them to do, to try to solve the problem together with the person, or decide to drop your expectation for now and handle the problem the way the other person wants it handled. And this is a very sort of simple heuristic for helping people make smart decisions about how to respond to problems. Because what people start to quickly see is that when you try to use plan A to impose your will, for instance, to make a kid do what you want them to do, that working out in your favor is hugely dependent on whether the kid has the skills to tolerate that imposition of will and to comply. And if they don't, look out. Not only is it not going to get the job done, it's going to make matters worse. It's going to actually trigger or escalate the very behavior that you might be trying to stop. And of course, there's nothing about imposing your will that helps a kid build skills, builds relationship, et cetera. We help people see that you can always have the opportunity to drop your expectation or solve the problem the way the other person wants it solved, just to keep the peace, to keep things calm. But that's not a way you're going to get your expectations met. The problem's going to live on. There's no skill building there. So what we teach people is, of these 3 options, really the only one that actually has you trying to solve the problem in a durable way, but build relationship and skills as you pursue your expectations, is plan B. And I do this little exercise when I have more time with people where I sort of list the goals people are trying to accomplish, and I ask them to figure out which of those goals each of these plans pursues. And I did this last week with the police on the Cape, and I know you all from Nantucket had your police represented there, and it's always fascinating to me because whether it's police or foster parents or kindergarten teachers, you name it, people always come to the same conclusion, which is to say, if your sole goal is trying to get your expectation met, come hell or high water, plan A might be your choice. If your sole goal is keeping the calm, plan C might be your choice. But if you actually want to solve the problem, build relationship, build skills, you're going to have to try to do plan B. So what we teach, this thing called plan B, is a structured problem solving process that includes 3 simple ingredients. But I always tell people, don't confuse simple with easy. The moment people try to do this, the moment they see how hard it is. And there's a lot packed into the 3 ingredients. But in essence, what we teach is we teach people to bring up a problem with somebody else with a neutral observation about the problem, not the person's behavior, but the situation that the behavior is happening around, and jump right into empathy mode. And to be a detective and work really hard. We teach people concrete tools for how to solicit information, to understand that person's concern or perspective about the problem at hand. What's challenging about the situation? What's hard for them? And only once you understand the other person's concern or perspective, not their solution to the problem, but their concern or perspective, do you move to the second ingredient where you share your concern. Not your solution to the problem, again, but your concern, your perspective, why this is a problem in your mind. And I always tell people, you only move to the third ingredient once you have 2 sets of concerns on the table. First, if we're doing this with a kid, the child's concern, then your concern. And in fact, if you only have 1 set of concerns on the table and it's the adults, you're headed right back to plan A. If you only have 1 set of concerns on the table and it's the child's, you're headed for plan C. You have to have both sets of concerns on the table for this to be plan B. Okay, and the hard work of plan B is clarifying the perspectives and concerns. Once you've done that, actually the brainstorming and solving is the easier part. And we teach people only to go forward to the third ingredient when you have the problem understood described as two sets of concerns that have yet to be reconciled. Then and only then do you invite the person to brainstorm with you, and you give them first crack at it. Now, again, we have very clear guideposts for how to do this. We have scripts that people can use to get them started. So there's a whole structure to it. And why is there a whole structure to it? Well, a couple of reasons. This structure represents our best understanding of how our brains process information, the neurobiologic sequence with which our brains process information. And this process with this structure is what our research has shown is an effective relational way to practice and build skills. Because remember, let's go back to why does challenging behavior happen in the first place? It's about skill, not will. Well, baked into these three ingredients is a ton of skills training in all 5 of those neuropsychological domains that I mentioned before. So literally, when you walk through problem solving using these 3 ingredients, you can't help but model and help the person you are partnering with to practice skills found in all of those areas that I mentioned before. And one of my favorite findings from our research is when, for instance, adults practice this process with kids, kids' neurocognitive skills develop in areas like problem solving, flexibility, frustration tolerance. But guess who else's skills also develop? The adults. We develop our own neurocognitive skills. So for instance, parents, adult caretakers get better at things like perspective taking, empathizing, flexible thinking. And why is this so important? Because it takes 2 to tango. Okay. For instance, a kid with real cognitive inflexibility, that doesn't tend to cause a lot of problems unless that cognitive inflexibility is met with more cognitive inflexibility. In other words, rigidity plus rigidity equals meltdown. You know, particularly in this day and age where the adults around these kids are so dysregulated ourselves, and dysregulation is contagious. More than half the battle is keeping the adults calm and regulated and accessible, whether those are parents, teachers, police officers, you name it. Now, there's some benefits to this kind of skills training, which sounds a little bit different, I know, than a lot of skills training, which have sort of structured curricula, you know, kids structured skills training sessions. In collaborative problem solving, or CPS we call it for short, these skills are taught naturalistically through the problem solving process. So you take real problems with real people in the kid's life and you use those as the opportunities for skills training, which has some distinct advantages because first, the kid doesn't have to sign up for skills training. They don't even have to sort of admit that there's a problem that they need help with. All they have to be willing to do is solve problems in mutually satisfactory ways and sort of smuggled in the back door for them and the adults or whoever is doing the problem solving with them is the skills training. And you know, this means it also doesn't have to transfer to the real world, which is one of the biggest problems with skills training approaches, which when you study brain development, you realize why that happens. Because if you practice skills in artificial circumstances, of course they don't transfer to real life. Because when you practice something in an artificial circumstance, different neural networks light up in the brain than the actual neural networks you need in real situations with real people. That's what we call the specificity principle of neuroplasticity. Sorry to go deep here a little on neurobiology, but I think it's important. One thing I mentioned earlier is this structured problem solving process. It maps onto how our brains process information. A good friend of mine and a noted trauma researcher who I do a lot of teaching with, Dr. Bruce Perry, coined this, this phrase. He says, regulate, relate, reason, which is his way of reminding people, you have to regulate somebody first before they can relate to you, engage in a relational activity, before you can reason with them. Because that's how our human brains are oriented. Information hits our brain low down in the brain, and only if we're regulated does information move up the brain to the part of the brain that helps us do relational activity, relate to somebody. And only if you're regulated and relating to somebody do you have access to your cortex to reason with that person, the smart part of your brain. So if you're trying to access the cortex, the smart part of the brain, which is what almost every clinician in the world is trying to do with people, you're trying to access the smart part of the brain so you can help build skills and things like that. You got to go in through the bottom of the brain. You got to regulate first before you can relate, before you can reason. And the cool thing about that problem solving process that I just walked you through is it operationalizes it. The first ingredient of this thing we call plan B, the empathy ingredient, is where you regulate somebody. Empathy is regulating. And only once you understand the other person's perspective and they're regulated, do you move up the brain to the second ingredient and say, all right, let me share my concerns so we can be relating to each other. And only if they're calm and with you, do you then go to the third ingredient and ask to talk to their cortex to do some problem solving together. So it's a structured problem solving process that maps on to how our brains process information. And all we tell people is you got 3 ingredients, do them in the right order. Don't start here. Don't try to start talking to the cortex. You got to start down here. And by the way, if at any point here, here, or here, the person you're working with looks like they're going brainstem on you, shutting down, escalating, you just go right back to the first ingredient and re-regulate them through empathy before you can start to move up the brain again. And you know, it was interesting working with Jackie last week with the police. You know, people were validating this with their lived experience on calls about what regulated and what dysregulated. And if things started to spiral out of control, how you needed to sort of go back to regulating somebody before you're going to be able to hope to they're going to relate to you or have reason sink in and be able to access the cortex. So I know this is a super quick overview, folks, but I hope one of the things you're getting a sense of is that when people use an approach like this, it sort of makes all these principles of trauma-informed care actionable. Because what you do is you have people, instead of barging in trying to use different forms of plan A, which is sort of born of power and control, you're reducing this power differential using plan B. You're not reducing adult authority, but you're reducing the power differential, which is what dysregulates people with trauma histories. This is encountering an adult or anybody, an authority figure, with somebody with a trauma history, they're most likely to get dysregulated, escalate, or shut down. Moving away from plan A to plan B reduces that power differential, helps people confront those kinds of triggering situations safely, and also gives the person a fair amount of control in the process, which is crucial whenever you're working with folks with trauma. The other thing I would say about the approach is that there's a fair amount of cultural humility to it. Big piece of this is all about that first ingredient of plan B. And empathy means not agreeing, not disagreeing. It means trying to understand, gather information, to understand somebody's perspective. You don't have to, it's not something you have to sort of be familiar with yourself, buy into. You just got to understand it. But you have to enter with an open mind, not assuming you know or understand, which is one of the things we try to teach. So, what have we seen where people use collaborative problem solving? Well, we've seen positive impacts in every place from schools, treatment programs, correctional facilities, in-home supports, hospital settings, clinics. Certainly, we see reductions in challenging behaviors and both what, as a psychologist, we call internalizing or externalizing symptoms, depression, anxiety, as well as symptoms that are of more of a disruptive nature. But we see less need for punitive responses. We see decreases in educator stress. As I mentioned, we see in schools and we work with, we see both student and educator skill development. And one of my favorite findings is we see kids reporting greater satisfaction with care they've received, even though they don't know that the people who are delivering the care have been trained in anything. They say, wow, things are looking much better as a result of people being trained differently. Last week when I was on the Cape, I shared these results, which are some of our most provocative ones from working with the New York City Police Department in the Department of Education in New York City, where we were asked to come in because of the massive number of assaults on officers in the schools and the resulting arrests and summonses of kids. And just with a little bit of professional development for at the time there were 4,500 cops in the schools in New York City, we were able to show a 58% reduction in arrests made in school, 67% reduction in summonses. I mean, talk about interrupting the school to prison pipeline right there. And it was not because police stopped doing those things and so all hell broke loose in the schools. No, we saw dramatic reductions in incidents in school at the same time. All right. I was hoping I would be able to squeeze in a quick overview like that to about a half an hour. So I'm thankful that I did, because I really hope that we can have some good discussion and question and answer. I do have some things I can share at the very end if you'd like, in terms of sort of resources and if you want to learn more. But as I said, I'd love to hear from you all, questions, discussions. Hopefully that was helpful and not trying to cram in too much information on you. I don't know how you all do it here, but feel free, in my mind, to, if you want to type in the chat, just unmute yourselves, raise your virtual hand, however you all like to do it here.
Does anyone have any questions? This is the time to do it.
Please, Jason.
How do we get you here for 3 days of training? And if we train the whole island, the town, Fairwinds, my wife and I'm just listening to you in my head, applying it to everything, not just parent, child, it's systems and organizations and, inside our own businesses. So I really appreciated everything that you took us through. I'm sure it's very much more complex than that and detailed to apply it, but thank you. But I on a serious note, I would like to see how we could get you here more. Maybe Jackie already has that planned out for us, but
I'm hoping and trying.
Okay.
Well, Jason, thank you for your comments. And the applicability you're seeing is, it's accurate. We've applied it in so many different kinds of settings, and that's why I mentioned for what people call communities of practice or systems of care that want to come together and say, we need some unifying approach. And one of the nice things about this is it supplies a unifying philosophy. People do well if they can. A unifying structure, unifying language, and again, can be used across settings. So you can get it going in schools and mental health settings and all kinds of places. So particularly on an island, there's tremendous opportunity for that kind of system of care work. And we'd love the opportunity to come and do a bunch of training. And we do trainings that, for instance, we offer trainings through our program on a monthly basis that are open to the public. So anybody can attend, and we get anybody. We get parents, 60-70% are educators. We get clinicians, we get prison guards, we get, you name it, anybody and everybody. Looks like Pauline has her virtual hand up. Why don't we?
Yeah, thank you. First, I apologize for not being on camera, but as you may tell from my voice, I'm homesick and I don't look so good at the moment. So, Dr. Ablon, I'm on school committee, and I'm sorry that there isn't anybody here that was able to attend today from the school. But I would love to talk with Jackie and yourself about getting some support for our schools. But as I sit and listen to your presentation, one of my concerns is the stress that's on our teachers. So in order for them to be able to step back and relearn, or if you will train into helping difficult situations, we're seeing really behavior from our teachers that we haven't seen before because they are so stressed. So would you work with them first before?
So that's what we do. We work with the educators to ultimately get to the kids. But look, I think it's the most important piece. And I don't know if anybody here knows the Harvard Center on the Developing Child, which is a great think tank here in Cambridge. they did this like massive multi-year study and came away with what's the biggest thing we need to focus on to help children's healthy development? Building capacity in adults. Don't focus on the kids, focus on the adults. And you're absolutely right. I see this in our work all across, not just North America, but beyond. The teachers are overwhelmed and stressed. And then they're coming to classrooms with kids whose skills haven't progressed, expectations are at the same place. It's a remarkable challenge. Now, one positive note, when I cited that research earlier on reductions in teacher stress, we found something fascinating. And that is that teacher stress decreased before we saw the needle move on behavioral challenges. In other words, the behaviors were still just as bad. The classrooms were still just as hard to manage, and teacher stress levels decreased as a result of training. I think the only explanation for that is instead of looking at that behavior through a traditional lens, which has a teacher feeling like their authority is questioned, kids are trying to undermine them, manipulate them, and it's triggering. It causes dysregulation in adults. Instead of looking through that lens, looking through the lens of this is about skill, not will. These kids are doing the best they can under difficult circumstances. That alone is regulating to adults. So some reason for optimism, even in these sort of chronically stressful times for our schools. I thought I saw another
Thank
hand,
you.
a couple hands. I think I saw Elise next and then Michael after that, perhaps.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, does MGH offer support for parents? And then you mentioned your monthly training. Can you tell me more about how I can refer parents to access?
Yeah, absolutely. So somebody Sue put in the chat there our website, which is for the program called Think Kids. And we do offer a lot of services for parents. Parents are welcome to attend our regular trainings, but we actually recommend for parents parent classes. Because instead of sort of like one huge dose, it's meeting over the course of 8 weeks with other parents in a group setting. And we found, interestingly, our research shows it's as effective as individual family therapy, which is also very, from a resource perspective, very encouraging. So it's learning alongside other parents, and we do it remotely at this point. So the parents from all over the place, over the course of 8 weeks, an hour and a half at time, and people can sign up for those right on our website. So this approach, by the way, I should mention, it started as a parenting approach in the late 90s, first and foremost. Our first randomized controlled trial was working with families. It's been slowly exported to all these organizations and settings as well, but that still remains a sort of heart and soul of what we do.
Okay, so they register right on the website.
They register right on the website. The best way for them to get there is there's a page dedicated to parents right on the homepage. Yep. Click parents and they'll see it right on there. And I can speak in a minute or two to some of the other resources as well, if that's helpful.
Thank you.
Sure. Michael.
So full transparency, I'm a former superintendent of schools on the island, and coach and teacher and lots of different roles. And we worked with Jackie trying to get you to our schools about 2 years ago and just couldn't do it as a matter of scheduling conflict. So I think it'd be a wonderful idea to bring you here and have you work with all aspects of the community, because I really buy into what you're talking about and the empathize. And then one thing I would take issue with, I don't like the perpetuation of the use of the phrase school to prison pipelines. To me, as an educator, that makes it feel like we are at fault for the numbers going into prison. And so I just would ask you to think about that in your future discussions.
Okay. Now,
and then finally,
I think it's fair. I do want to point out, though, that punitive school discipline is, as you well know, there's a strong correlation between entering into school disciplinary practices and juvenile justice involvement. But I hear you about the phrase, and sort of blame is definitely not the intent in invoking that phrase, which is just for others.
Yep, I understand that, and I've heard the term many times. To follow up on what Elise and Pauline said, in working with teachers, one of the biggest things that I hear from teachers is their frustration that the parents that need this the most aren't going to get it. They're not going to even come. And I've heard that from teachers, and I hear it from parents who are doing a great job, who are frustrated with other parents who make their parenting more difficult. I'm sure you've heard this before, and I'd be interested to hear how we get those difficult to reach parents who need it most.
Yeah, I think, look, I think one of the reasons they're difficult to reach is historically they've been blamed for their children's behavior in a way that isn't really fair. And I think, I talked about conventional wisdom before. Look, it was only like 20 years ago that we used to refer to the refrigerator mother as a cause for autism. And to this day, we are very quick to blame parents for their children's challenging behavior. And, is parenting important in shaping behavior? Of course, absolutely, but it is just not that simple. And I can tell you from our own clinic, my own clinical practice, how often I work with very challenging kids who have siblings who are not so challenging with the same set of parents. So I think part of the answer here is, and it gets back to what you were saying with schools too, which is like the school to prison pipeline sounds blaming of schools. Anything that smacks blaming of parents, and those parents are out. And it's one of the reasons we like to start with the philosophy behind this work and really saying, look, this is blameless. Like, this is not the kid's fault. It's not the teacher's fault. It's not the parents' fault. No more than we would blame any of those people for instance, a learning disability. We used to think kids, who struggled to read were lazy or dumb. We blamed their parents for not reading books to them and stuff like that. And then we realized, whoa, hold on a second, we got that one wrong. And I think a similar process needs to happen with behavioral challenges. And so entering the discussion from a place of making sure that we're not placing blame is going to be crucial to engaging parents who I think are sick and tired of sort of being blamed for their kids' behavior. Easier said than done, I know, but I think that's the operative factor there.
Thank you.
So,
Amanda, yeah.
So I just wanted to say thank you so much for this presentation. I am the clinical director of Fairwinds, and we have many clinicians that are working very closely with children. And I think, we're seeing a lot of behavioral issues, as I'm sure you're aware. And we're working very closely with the schools, and we actually have clinicians that are embedded in the schools helping to see these kids during the day if we can't get them seen at after hours. And I think it'd be wonderful to be able to have you come and speak to the island of the teachers and our clinicians. We actually have a new training center that we just launched. So maybe it's something that we could collaborate with NAMI and also the schools and other providers to be able to bring this training to the island. And I think that, I know I was texting with one of someone from the school. They unfortunately have a COVID outbreak right now. So I think a lot of their people are outside.
Yeah.
So that's why they're probably not here today, but I'd be happy to, talk with them, and then hopefully we can have you come to the island and do a wonderful training for everybody.
Yeah, look, I'd love to do that. And I think if there's some opportunity to have some sort of broader exposure, just to have people get a sense of the ideas. I mean, this was super quick, you could do something a little longer to get into some detail, and then, see if there's interest. But what you're describing, having your clinicians embedded in the school, what a great opportunity. And again, if the schools could get some training, and you have some experts trained, there's real synergy there. And we have a certification program where we certify people in collaborative problem solving and certify them to become trainers as well. And that's a tremendous opportunity for the kind of staff you're talking about, because then you could have your own collaborative problem solving experts, which is crucial for, what you want to create. If something like this is going to be helpful, you need sustainability on the island, in the schools. We're happy to come and work with folks, but one of the things we've learned from our own implementation and implementation science is it's all about sustainability. If you can get it up and running, keeping it going. Because the saddest thing is all the professional development, the scarce resources and time going to things that are just, they become sort of, things of the past. And in schools, they're, those binders that are collecting dust on the shelves. And so it's sort of what I'm saying is try to avoid what I call spray and pray training. Really be thinking from the beginning about how can we make this sustainable here.
And that's what we're doing with our trainings, is that, we are allowing some people to get certified. So then it's something that then can be taught ongoing to new staff on the island.
Great. I imagine people are going to have to run here in a sec. So let me just in case people want to check out some other resources. So I think, you saw the website in there. That's the main thing, thinkkids.org. So there's a bunch of stuff on there. But one of the other things you can do, or just reach out to Jackie too, is I'm happy to meet with folks, to talk next steps or other constituents, things like that. So, be in touch with Jackie, with me, and you can reach out to us through the website as well. But if you just want to learn a little bit more on your own, I guess I would say these two books are good resources. This is the one, Jason, I think you had made the comment earlier about sort of applicability, just about everywhere. This book, and these are both on audiobook as well, is sort of about how you apply this thinking, this process across all of walks of life for us. This is our curriculum for schools, which walks sort of school through how to do this. And we do, as I mentioned, we have a whole training continuum from introductory to advanced training to certifications that we offer. We do partner with whole communities to implement the work as well. And hopefully one of the things people take away from this brief flyby here is the philosophy is one of the most important pieces. This notion of people do well if they can. The idea that everybody's doing the best they can to handle what the world's throwing at them with the skills they can bring to bear in the moment. And that mindset shift is, it's perhaps the most important thing I think I shared with you all today. So thank you for having me. I hope this was helpful. I really appreciate the interest, and we'd love a chance to follow up. We do work all over the world, and I'm always saying to myself, I wish we did more work in our home state here. As they say, you're never a prophet in your own land. So to have collaborations, with you all would be wonderful, and be eager to think next steps. So thanks again for having me, folks.
Well, thank you very much, Stuart, as always. But I do have a plan. And I would love to have you on Nantucket, and perhaps we can collaborate with some of the other people on the island, like Fairwinds. I'd love to have the type of program that started the whole thing in Hyannis, where we had maybe an open community program where you were able to do like a day. You did your 5 or 6 hour presentation that day, and we had a nice luncheon, that type of thing. I think that we can work together and probably be able to figure that out. Maybe next fall is kind of what I have in mind. So no, I'm
love it. Sounds great. Okay, I know you always do.
So,
all right.
Thanks again.
Thanks for having me, everybody. Nice to meet you. Have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye now.
Bye. So we probably wanted to make most of this Stuart, and we did get him for an hour. And I will tell you that Barnstable, Mashpee, and Monomoy school systems bought into the full thing, and every person in the Barnstable school system, each of these school systems had the introductory, which is a full day program. And then each school system chose a number of people going from all the different schools in their system, and chose people to be mentors. And they received 2 trainings, 6 months apart, that were 2.5 days in order to be qualified mentors to keep the whole system going. I reviewed the system with Barnstable last June before the person that I worked with, their director of student services, retired, and asked her how she thought it was going. And she felt that they'd maintained it very, very well at the elementary and middle school level. High school level needed more work. And we figured out that maybe high school level was a little more difficult because the people started in high school, there was so much pressure on getting into college and grades and testing and all of those things. They kind of took precedence over the children's mental health. It was more their academic achievements because of the pressures of college in the future. So that was an interesting point. But we were very satisfied with the program. It's a fairly pricey program. Stuart has changed the program a bit since we did this. I think we started this about 5 years ago. And the Vineyard is in the process right now. And Stuart did an analysis, well, his people did an analysis of the school system there, a readiness analysis. And then based on that analysis, they came up with what a appropriate plan would be for the school system. The other thing that Michael brought up, Michael Kozart, is the fact of getting the parents. And that was interesting because in Barnstable, I wanted to have a parents part, and we find that it's extremely hard to get parents to outside meetings anyway. And as everyone pointed out, it's often the parents that need it the most that don't come. And that's why I kind of think that having an open community presentation like we did in Hyannis might be a very good start, and would try to drum up a lot of support for the whole thing. So anyway, that's it for where we are now. Sue Mittinen, where are you? Sue?
I'm here.
Okay. Do you want to talk a bit, because you were very instrumental in it last year? May is Mental Health Awareness Month. I know we're all in the stages of planning events and stuff, and it would be great to have a combined calendar of everything that's going on. But we also did quite a lot of signage and things like that. You want to review that with us, Sue, and maybe we can move forward with that this year.
Yeah, so I'm putting in the chat a link. We have the lawn signs that we made last year that we put out in various places. So I made a sign up form and a Google form so that if you're willing to have one at your business or your home, we can deliver. This will collect the information to help me put them out. Kevin did tables in Stop and Shop last year. So I don't know if that's something we'll keep doing.
I would think we could. I spoke with Kevin yesterday. As I said, he was on the Cape in my police training. And he is, remember last year we were going to try to get a big banner at the landfill, and it didn't happen because of a miscommunication. Well, he said he thought it wouldn't be a problem this year. So maybe we can do that, and I can get one made and sent over. I don't know. We had talked too, and we need to have a subcommittee meeting again about the list of a basic list of resources, things like that.
Yeah, I don't remember if Gosnold was going to have a bookmark made, and I don't remember if that got made for the book fest, the One Book, One Island. But that was supposed to have the most recent.
Well, if it hasn't, then let's pursue that. I certainly can pursue that with Gosnold.
There's a template, but I don't know if they actually physically had them made, although I think if we're gonna do it, we need to add, there's the new, not 911, but there's a new number that is
899, isn't it?
No, I don't think it's 899. That's coming out come July. That should be added. And then the safe place, the number, we should be adding probably the 24/7 one that's available 24/7 versus like the office hour ones. So I'm sure we could get that template and then edit it and then use that.
Yeah, that sounds good. Easy.
That's an easy one.
Yeah, yeah, that's easy. So we should, I think if any of us have events that we're planning, that are particular. It would be great if we published one calendar of events maybe and made it into a poster or something. Put them all there.
Yeah,
I'm
that's,
sure Fairwinds had something planned. Nobody has anything planned? Okay.
I think we're in the process of talking about it.
Yeah,
So,
we are too. So,
more information.
I can send in everything that we're doing with Sue. It's mainly Blooming Bids and then
yeah,
collaborating
right.
with Dragonfly.
Yeah. I think it also, Jason, might be a good time to try to, if we're ready, to do a little bit about the assessment plan and where that is.
Yeah, I think we're getting close, especially once we find the consultant and we've got a kind of something to more
Yeah, we
tangible.
have to have some meat here
Yeah,
to throw out.
I just say thank you, Jackie, for bringing Stuart here. I didn't know anything about him. He had me, he had me at hello, that whole thing. He had me like 10 minutes in. I went on Amazon and bought his book within seconds because would love to get him here, whether it's through our training institute for clinicians and in the schools. And then I can see it for just nonprofits in general, where Margaretta could probably fund him coming to think like how nonprofits can work within collaborative, just the whole thing was great. So is he like the one person that does the training, or does he have like a team of people?
He has a team.
Okay.
It's kind of hard to get him, but I know that I could get him at least for the preliminary. And I think, you see, what we did in Hyannis, which I was talking about a bit before he came on, the first time we had him. And as I said, it was on a Saturday. We just put the information out and had a venue. It was actually a hotel. And we planned on lunch, and he did the 6-hour presentation with lunch in the middle. And it was open. We had a mix of parents, teachers, educators, social workers. That I like that idea in a way because it, as an introduction, it gives the whole community an introduction, not just teachers or clinicians. Then you take it in from there, what we want to do. And then it was from there that the decisions were made to go into the schools, and 3 of the school districts bought into it. I paid for it, which was expensive. We spent $150,000 or $60,000 on that program for the schools that we raised.
150?
Yep, he's expensive. I mean, we're talking about Mass General and Harvard and so on, but I know there's a lot of interest in funding this on the island.
That would be all of our training institute funding, Amanda. So maybe
Well, I would go for some specific grants, and that's what I did. I had specific grants for it. But what we found, you see, the program in the schools, it would be extend over 2 or 3 years, and it's a program that,
I see.
yeah, and so it's gradual. And the first thing is to get everybody in the school. And we had 1,400 people in the auditorium at Barnstable High School, which was the entire staff of the Barnstable school system, for this 6-hour introductory when we went with it with the schools. And then, as I said, each school picked out people to get the intensive training, that they would be the mentors to carry the program on. Because, but one of my parameters was we had to have everybody trained. It couldn't be optional for the teachers, because I'm not going to pay $10,000 for a lecture and have people decide if they want to go or not.
Yeah.
It had to be mandatory. So, but we can, he's changed the program a bit since then, and he would be very interested, I think, on tailoring it to Nantucket. And that's what he's doing on the Vineyard. They've had this readiness assessment on the Vineyard, and the Vineyard is, I think, different than Nantucket in the way they run the school system, because the Vineyard has these towns that are separate, just like they have 6 police departments, which kind of blows my mind. There's schools, there are some schools, like elementary schools, that are particular to a town. They do have a superintendent of schools, but the superintendent of their schools isn't necessarily totally in charge of every school. They have one high school, and I think it's one middle school, but those elementary schools are kind of self managing. So it takes a lot more to get a system together on the Vineyard, I think, than it does on Nantucket. On Nantucket, it would be getting the buy-in from the superintendent and the director of student services, essentially.
Yeah,
If
I don't
you-
think I don't think that'd be a problem at all. I mean,
I don't either. on
we're working very
Nantucket.
closely with the schools, and we're also working very closely with the private schools. So I think,
Yeah,
you know, they
yeah,
would,
we included the private schools too. And as I said, I had already started working with Mike Kozart when he was the superintendent, and it wasn't a matter of them not wanting it, it was a matter of scheduling at that particular time. So
Mhm.
I think the possibilities are here, but I really, my attitude, my goal would be to have a island-wide symposium type thing open to everybody and for the exposure.
yeah, and
And
we
I,
did that in the past with, we had someone come in and talk about ADHD who was an expert. And so he did one training to all the teachers and clinicians at the school. And then he did one where parents were able to come to an open forum and learn.
Yeah.
And that was really effective. And I know like a lot of parents that we work with on a day-to-day basis would love to do this.
oh, that's good. Now, ideally, he mentioned Dr. Bruce Perry, and Dr. Bruce Perry is the expert on ACEs and early childhood trauma. And he and Stuart are writing a book together too. And unfortunately, Bruce Perry is out of Texas, but he does come to Mass General and work with Stuart very often. And Stuart has said there might be a time when we could coordinate and I could have the two of them together, which would be absolutely fantastic. Bruce Perry just wrote a book with Oprah of all people, just, and I mean, he's pretty famous these days too. So, but Nantucket has a certain appeal too, as you know. And so I think we could probably manage that. Probably next fall, maybe, or even next late winter. It'll take a little putting together. It'll cost some money, but I think we could probably put that money together for that event. For the school system, then we would have to dig deeper, but it would be over a period of probably 3 years or so that those expenses would incur.
Well, at least Margaretta's suggested there's some interest on their end.
Yeah, there's interest on their part. Plus, you have to remember that Mass General is Nantucket Cottage Hospital, and there was some talk, there's been some communication between Chris, I know, and probably Gary Shaw too, when he was there, and people from Mass General about bringing that program over. Now, I don't know if Mass General would ever help us pay for anything. I don't know, but I'm willing to go after anything I can. I like to go after money, quite frankly.
Jackie, what about the Tower Foundation?
That would be, that's definitely a possibility, although we're going after them for Martha's Vineyard because Martha's Vineyard finally has their stuff ready and is ready to go. So my idea in Nantucket, we'd get the community ready first with an event that wouldn't cost as much, but would be doable. And then go for the assessment, which doesn't cost as much. And by the time we're ready to actually, if we were to do the school system, we'd probably be pretty well through with the Vineyard. So we might be able to go after Tower again. I mean, it's all, a lot of this is timing.
Jackie, I got to run. Thank you so much for bringing this. It was really, really great. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh,
Have a good Easter, everybody.
It comes in white.
Jackie.